This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Tito's Handmade Vodka is America's favorite vodka for a reason. From the first legal distillery in Texas, Tito's is 6 times distilled till it's just right. And naturally gluten-free, making it a high-quality spirit that mixes with just about anything. From the smoothest martinis to the best Bloody Marys. Tito's is known for giving back, teaming up with nonprofits to serve its communities and do good for dogs. Make your next cocktail with Tito's. Distilled and bottled by 5th Generation Inc., Austin, Texas. 40% alcohol by volume. Savor responsibly.
Welcome to the Japan on Film podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and today I am welcoming a new guest, and that is Eoin Smith. And today we are going to be talking about the 1991 Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, which same title in both Japanese and in English, so that makes it pretty easy. And I should say, Eoin, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm very good, thanks. Very good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good myself. But before we get too much into the movie, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm an author and a magician based in Aberdeen in the northeast of Scotland. As an author, mostly short stories published so far, working on some kind of longer form stuff at the moment. But I've also kind of been published by some kind of comedy publications and things around the world. And as a magician, I perform on stage. I perform at events, and I also work backstage and behind the scenes on kind of plays and musicals, and help the production teams bring some magical elements to their performances. So everything's all about creativity, all about connecting with an audience, and everything's good fun.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, I had you on my other podcast, Superhero Cinephiles, and you talked a little bit about your history with both magic and writing. But for anyone who does not listen to both these shows, which if you don't, you probably should. But for anyone who doesn't listen to
if they don't listen to them
exactly.
both, that's awful.
Exactly. Yeah. But no, they're two very different audiences probably. So it's understandable if you don't. But for those who don't, can you tell them kind of a little bit of your history with writing and magic and how you kind of found your way into both of those two things?
Absolutely. So I've always felt my calling in life was to be a writer. I've loved kind of hearing stories or reading from a very young age. I remember picking up, ransacking my parents' bookshelves when I was maybe 8 or 9, and picking up things like Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton or War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. And that really got me hooked on science. I mean, I already loved science fiction in terms of watching stuff on TV, but that really got me hooked in reading it. And that's definitely continued through my life. Interestingly, it's not necessarily what I write at the moment. I don't necessarily write what I read, but that kind of sense of the fantastic has never kind of left me. And in terms of magic, I grew up in a magical household. My dad is a professional magician. He never forced me to become a magician. He never forced me to be interested in magic. But I think if you're growing up around that, how could you not become fascinated by it? How could you not want to get involved in that world? It's such a joyful thing to be able to share with people. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the thing that about both of them, it's about connections. It's about reaching an audience and finding a way to convey something to them, whether that is an emotion, a feeling, a concept that you want to communicate. I think both of those can be done really effectively, either through writing or through magic.
Sorry for a little delay there, guys. If you hear any moaning in the background, my son and my daughter are apparently fighting as usual. So it's a Saturday afternoon here when we're recording, so they are home from preschool, which makes things a little bit challenging. So with your writing and stuff like that, I know before you told me that you couldn't really say too much about anything that you got coming down the pike, but is there anything, like, we record these shows kind of far in advance, so is there anything in the near future when maybe people should be paying attention to your social media or anything like that for anything that might be coming up?
I hope so. So I've got a couple of short stories that are with magazines and publications for consideration. Unfortunately, sometimes the waiting period for that can be months. So I would hope maybe we'll be able to add something to the show notes if there is something in the pipeline kind of when the episode comes out. But yeah, the world of an author is very much a waiting game. And you have to get used to rejection quite a lot, and you have to not take it personally. You can submit a story to hundreds of places, and it might get rejected not because it's a bad story, but because it's just not the right fit for that publication or even for that issue of that publication. So I don't necessarily have anything I can share in terms of dates or anything at the moment, but I can share a bit of advice for authors, any aspiring authors out there, which is don't be disheartened if you get something rejected, because if you believe in your work, someone else will as well. You just have to find the right person out there that wants to publish it, and just kind of keep submitting it.
Okay, very good advice. Yeah. So anyway, as I mentioned, today we are going to be talking about Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. But before we get into the movie, what is your history with Japanese films?
So, I grew up on a heavy diet of Saban TV programs. So things like Power Rangers, things like Beetleborgs. And as a young kid, I was oblivious to the fact that these were kind of localized versions of Japanese TV shows. So they instilled a love for kaiju and mecha in me before I knew what kaiju and mecha were. And I think as I got older, I just I found out more about that. And yeah, I enjoy watching cinema from all around the world. Godzilla vs King Ghidorah is the first Japanese film I believe I watched. I had it recorded off the TV on a VHS that I practically wore out the tape of. I watched it all the time. Interestingly, I haven't watched it in probably about 20 years, so rewatching it for this was really fun. For all the bits that I remembered and all the bits that I didn't. So yeah, I do try and watch. I haven't watched that many Godzilla films, but I did recently watch Godzilla -1, and my mind was absolutely blown. It was awesome.
Yeah, stunning movie.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. And I've literally anyone that I see, whether they're interested in kind of that kind of film or not, I have told them to watch it. But I probably say that in terms of Japanese films, probably more anime that I watch, because my wife is very into kind of Miyazaki's films. So we've worked our way through most of his films. We like the Lupin the Third films, and I really like Hosoda's films. So things like Summer Wars, Wolf Children, The Boy and the Beast. I really connected with those films. So I'd say my my experience with Japanese films is mostly through anime, but yeah, I mean, I love watching big monsters beat the crap out of each other. So rewatching this really reminded me of how much I love like kind of Godzilla and kaiju movies, and it made me think, right, I need to go back and watch more of these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was going to be my next question too. Was what was kind of your history with this movie? But I'd assumed you'd had some history with it, because out of all the Godzilla movies, you picked this one. And it's not like this was like the next one in the list of the order, because it's just like, because the only ones we've covered on this show are, we covered Shin Godzilla, we covered the -1, the original one, and also Godzilla Raids Again, which was the second movie in the series. So you weren't picking one of the kind of like the reboot type things or anything like that. You weren't picking the next one in the series. You went straight for this one, which I was actually kind of surprised when I was looking through the collection and I saw that it was the 1991 movie. When you said Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, my mind immediately went to one of the earlier ones. Like, I think probably the first one that he was in is what I thought it was you were asking about. So I'm like, oh, okay, it's one of the Heisei period ones. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, although I'm not, although I haven't watched lots of Godzilla stuff, I'm fascinated by it. I've actually got the official guide to Godzilla sitting next to me here, nice, on my shelf, and so I know a bit about the story and the lore and all the different eras and stuff, which I've kind of learned later in life. But yeah, this is really interesting. I was doing a bit of reading about it because it's the second film in the Heisei era, I believe. Or
I think it's the third one, I believe.
But it came after Godzilla versus Biollante, which was which fascinatingly the story of came from a public writing competition, which I thought was really interesting. But I read that it, although it was critically really well received because it was quite a dark story, they decided that they wanted to go for something a bit lighter. Following up, which is why they brought back King Ghidorah, and they also threw pretty much every sci-fi story element in the world into one film, which is just amazing. Yeah, it's just awesome. It's got literally everything you could possibly want in it.
So I think we had different, a little bit different reactions coming back from this, because I do agree they did throw everything in there. I wasn't quite as taken with it as you were, though.
I think I've definitely got those rose tinted glasses on because I absolutely adored this film as a child. But you've got UFOs, dinosaurs, psychics, time travel, teleportation, androids, and two giant monsters. It's like it's a wild ride.
Well, yeah, it's funny because I was watching this last night and my kids were still awake and my son was watching parts of it, and he's about almost 3 years old. And whenever, we had Godzilla or King Ghidorah on or their dinosaur forms on, he was going apeshit for it. He's just like jumping all over the place. He's screaming. He's so excited. So it's definitely a movie that was made with the kid audiences in mind. And I saw, I don't have that book, so I haven't done as much reading on it as you have, but just from what the Wikipedia article says, it does kind of track with what Wikipedia says here, because there was kind of this idea that, because Godzilla versus Biollante had actually been the most expensive Godzilla film at that time, but it had a kind of a poor audience performance, and it ended up losing money. And so that made them think that they needed to kind of revitalize the series. So I guess in a way, this is kind of a revitalization, because they decided they did want to start bringing back the classic monsters. Biollante was obviously a new monster, so that was a different story. And this was, like you said, this was the third film in the Heisei era, so that was after the kind of a darker rebrand that they had with Return of Godzilla in 84, I want to say, or 86, somewhere about there. Although Godzilla versus Biollante did have a lot of positive review, like you said, and I haven't seen that one, so I was just kind of like looking at, just what people had said about it. Before we had Mark Buskett on the show to talk about Shin Godzilla, and he's posted reviews of like all the Godzilla films on Letterboxd. So whenever I watch one of these Godzilla movies, I check out his reviews on Letterboxd, and I saw the one he did for Godzilla versus King Ghidorah, and he mentioned and he opened the review talking about like how this picks up from the end of Biollante, and he had a lot of praise for Biollante, it seems. So it definitely seems like that is, considered one of the better films of this era. Whereas this
I'm definitely going to be checking it out because I've not seen it either. But this one's definitely a different beast.
Yeah. This one's definitely much more in line. This definitely feels much like, so it's kind of funny. Like I said, I originally thought this was one of the Showa era pictures when you gave me the name, and then I was kind of surprised to see it was the Heisei pictures. But other than the fact that it has, better monster effects, I really think this could very easily fit in the Showa era of films. It definitely has that kind of feel of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So what were some of the things that jumped out at you this time around?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's kind of got everything in it. Which I just thought was like, I didn't remember there being so many. Like I remembered the time travel element, and I remembered like kind of the going back to the dinosaur, but I did not remember kind of all the androids and the teleportation. I didn't remember that there was a psychic in it, which seemed a bit odd. Apparently, Mickey was a character that was introduced in Godzilla vs. Biollante, and appears in a number of the Heisei-era films. So I kind of guess that makes sense when if you've maybe seen the previous film, that maybe makes a bit more sense. But for me, it was just the having a psychic was a little bit odd. But yeah, it did strike me that I remembered the broad strokes of it, but I didn't remember that they threw the kitchen sink at it as well. And yeah, it's a really interesting story. I think that there was, when it was originally, annoyingly, I could only find an English dubbed version of it. I couldn't find a subtitled version to rewatch, which is, I suppose, is true to the experience I had as a kid, because it was definitely a dub that I watched when I was like 7 or 8. But I think that when it was originally shown in America, this film was criticized for being anti-American at the point where the dinosaur saves the Japanese troops from the Americans, and I was watching it thinking, yeah, but I mean, if it was an American film, the dinosaur would be saving the American troops from the Japanese troops. It's like, I find that quite interesting, because it felt like a bit of a, reading about the history and the public reaction to the film. It felt like a bit of an overreaction, because it's like, well, if you were watching a Hollywood film, the roles would be reversed, and no one would be talking about it. But interesting to kind of see that play out. And yeah, I think I did. It was very obviously aimed at kids. We'll talk about the kind of plot in more detail, but when you look at the kind of the small winged creatures, the Dorats that then become King Ghidorah, they are clearly designed to appeal to kids. They're cute little fluffy beasts, and I think that was just really apparent that they were definitely aiming for kids with it. Some of the other things that I was kind of reading around was apparently the time travel aspect was influenced by Back to the Future. So Back to the Future 2, I think, had recently come out in the cinema, and they really wanted to capitalize on that, because they thought, this is such a popular film. How can we build on that? So that is one of the reasons that time travel is involved. I found out that it was the first film not produced by Tanaka, who was the Godzilla creator. And also it was the return of the original composer, Akira Ifukube. You can hear the classic Godzilla theme in there. And actually, one of the things that stood out for me was I really liked the music in this film. I thought it was really effective, and I really liked the kind of themes that ran through it. Other than maybe the slightly corny 90s sci-fi sounds of when the android was running. That I'm not so sure about that, but the rest of it, I did actually really like the music.
Yeah. So there was so Back to the Future Part 3 actually came out the year before this. That came out in 1990. Yeah. Part 2 came out the year before that in 89. So I just wanted to quickly double check on that. And also there was speaking of the influence, so I want to talk about that controversy, because that actually kind of ties in. The American side of things actually ties into one of the things that really made me kind of sit up and be like, what the hell? And it wasn't, so I was just looking at the Wikipedia article to prepare for this, and one of the the headlines they have in the table of contents is about controversy. So I'm like, oh, I wonder what controversy it has. And so I scroll down, and it talks about just that, the fact that Godzilla steps on these American soldiers, and one of the big things, though, is that this was a period of economic tension between America and Japan. So I think that kind of fueled a lot of the controversy, because I'm saying this as an American, that I didn't even blink when that happened. It didn't bother me at all. I'm just like, okay, whatever. And in fact, there is maybe this was in the book that you read too, because this was a Godzilla historian named Steve Rifle said American media reports of supposed anti-Americanism weren't really thought-provoking or insightful. But it wasn't only... Was that the same guy?
No, this book's by Graham Skipper.
Oh, okay. But yeah, apparently there was Gerald... I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Gerald Globitz of the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association appeared with the director on Entertainment Tonight, and he condemned the film, to the director's face, saying it's in very poor taste and detrimental to American-Japanese relations. And even Ishiro Honda, who directed the original Godzilla, he also said that the scene where Godzilla attacks and crushes the American troops went too far. So there was even some controversy about it in Japan itself.
I think that's really interesting, because maybe I'm watching it through the eyes of a time when there aren't those tensions. So like you said, I watched it and I didn't really bat an eye, because it was like, well, that's just a thing that's happened in this film, and it's told from the perspective of this country, so of course it's going to be focusing on that, But I guess looking at those tensions at the time when the film came out, it's really interesting to hear that there was controversy on both sides.
Yeah, I doubt if you'd have that same kind of tension, you'd have that same kind of controversy if this film were released today. I don't know. Maybe you would, because the America's insane right now, so who knows?
But then if you look at something like Godzilla -1, it's chronicling the aftermath of a kamikaze pilot, and yet I don't think anyone has mentioned anything about that. No,
so I feel like that's different, because for a few reasons. I mean, for one, -1, and we talked a whole lot. Everybody can go back and listen to when we talked about -1. But -1, I feel like it just very in brief, it does offer a lot of criticism of the kamikaze program and just kind of like the ethos behind it. And although it does depict the aftermath of the fire bombings of Tokyo and how Tokyo was just basically completely leveled, there is not really any direct condemnation of the Americans. It's almost treated as if this is a natural disaster more than anything else. So there's not really that kind of controversy. In fact, I would think there's probably more controversy in the original 1954 Godzilla film, where they kind of call things out a little bit more directly. Whereas here, they don't really do that. At least in -1, they don't really do that. So I think here, this is probably the most at least of the Godzilla films I've seen, I think this is probably the most direct it gets with any sort of anything coming close to an anti-American message, and I don't even really think it is that. I mean, Omori himself, talking about it back in 2006, he said, "I'm not anti-American. I love American movies, and I've always watched American movies. Most American movies are, in the same sense, made the way I made my movie. I just wanted to make a movie with American Army people in it, and to put rumors to rest, I am not anti-American. I love American war movies, but looking at all the ones I've watched over the years, Americans never lose. And so I thought they should lose at least once. Why don't the Americans ever lose?" I should, suggest you go watch some of the Vietnam era pictures, but besides that, I think he's more or less. I think he makes a good point. Like this, and if this were an American movie and it depicted, Japanese troops getting killed by something, I don't think nobody in America would bat an eye about it. I mean, go back and look at Pearl Harbor. That was a So I don't think. I really think that controversy is kind of overblown. But my whole problem with the American stuff was just, I don't know where they got these Americans to play these parts, but these are just, I wonder, did they just round up a bunch of English teachers in Tokyo and just, hire them for the day or something? Because these guys are just the most god-awful actors I've ever seen. They're just terrible.
That's so true.
It's just like very, very true. The delivery of their dialogue, the movements, everything is just like so ham-fisted. It feels like they're just I don't even know what it feels like, because I can't even imagine giving this bad a performance unless you are trying to intentionally give a performance this bad. I mean, this is like The Room level acting.
Yeah. One of the things that I found interesting with the Americans was, obviously, I was watching the dubbed version, and I was watching it going, I don't know if they've dubbed the American voices with other American voices, or if they haven't. Like, I couldn't tell, because it seemed kind of as disconnected as the dubbed voices, and I just thought that's really weird if they have done that. But yeah, I would agree that it was just, and I will say, this came from the 90s school of dubbing, where it was not good. The dubbing was bad.
So I didn't watch the dub. I was able to watch the original Japanese audio, and so I'm guessing the English. Jealous. I'm guessing the English, the soldiers was the same then in both, because it was horribly stinted and it did sound like a bad dub, actually. So I think maybe that's just, I don't think that was a dub. I think that was just how bad the performances were.
Great. They're just really bad actors. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, terrible. About the problem too. Omori also said that the American extras in the film had been happy about being crushed and squished by Godzilla. Which I think I would love that too. I mean, it was kind of like when David Cronenberg appeared in Jason X, and his one requirement for making a cameo was, can Jason kill me first? Or something like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like you want to be part of that thing that you've grown up
exactly. Watching. Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't want to be squished by Godzilla? But another issue I had too is, these two guys are talking, and one of them says to the other, he's like, "Whoa, this is a good story to tell your son, Major Spielberg." I'm like, come the fuck on. I get you guys love Spielberg, and I get that, from his involvement in Back to the Future, and then obviously this would lead to, obviously we'd have, Jurassic Park, and obviously they were influenced by Jaws as a result, because of that too. Jurassic Park would come later, but it still, I mean, come on, be a little bit more subtle with your references.
Yeah, it was ham-fisted, to say the least. I did have a chuckle when they said that, and it's actually one of the things that I wrote down as well.
I actually backtracked to make sure I heard it properly. I'm like, no, he didn't just say that, and yeah, he did.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're in any doubt of whether this film is, carrying on the dark tones of Godzilla versus Biollante or taking a lighter turn, I think this is the moment that you fully commit to that.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come back and we'll talk more about this film. And we're back, still talking about Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. Now let's dig into some of the story elements of this, because there are some things that, like you said, this does throw everything into this movie. Because we've got, and one of the things that kind of drove me nuts about this is just the lack of logic with the time travel elements. Because I mean, like, going back to the Future, I love Back to the Future, but when it comes to the time travel logic in it, it doesn't really make a lick of sense. And I think with time travel movies, I think here's the thing that I land on. Your time travel movie can be utterly insane and illogical as long as it is entertaining enough to distract me from the fact. Back to the Future does that. Like, Back to the Future, you don't really, it's such a good movie. You get so wrapped up in the story and in the performances that it's not until after the movie is over, and then if maybe you happen to be thinking about it for 5 minutes, that you're like, wait a second, that doesn't quite line up. Like, is it now? How does like, if it does change everything, then how come Marty still remembers everything else? Does his memory change over time to catch up? Or is this an alternate version of Marty? And then what happened to the original Marty from this universe? Is he gone now?
Yeah.
Is he replaced him? And then, you know, Marty now remembers or does Marty now remember a completely different timeline, which is going to completely fuck up his life going forward? So it's like, it's all these questions about how the time travel stuff doesn't really work there, or all these other questions it poses if you think about it for a few minutes, but you don't care because it's such a fun movie. Conversely, this movie, I don't feel it's entertaining enough for me to not notice all the holes in the time travel stuff. Because, for example, this whole movie is about this, like, the whole plot that the Futurians who are basically the villains of this piece, the whole plot that they're working on here is that they are coming back in time. They come from a future where Japan has become so economically powerful that they basically conquered the world through economics. Like, they talk about Japan buying up continents. And it's it is almost comical to look back on that now from this time period, because that was the fear that everybody had about Japan's economic power back in the 80s, and then the 90s was famously, I guess this was made before the lost decade really kicked in and the bottom fell out. But but the funny thing I was thinking of is everything that they're fearing about Japan in this movie basically is what China's doing now with their, like, Belt Road initiatives and all that kind of stuff. So I thought that was kind of ironic. But the other thing here is, so their whole plan is Japan has gotten so economically powerful that they're basically controlling the world now. And so now we have to destroy Japan before it becomes this massive superpower. And so then they go back in time, and their idea for destroying it is to erase Godzilla from history. So they're going to erase Godzilla from history, and then they're going to do that by they're going to go to back in time, and they're going to have these Dorats become Ghidorah. And then, if I'm having trouble remembering, it's just because this is so illogical. And then when they go back to the present, they realize our characters, they realize the mistake they've made with the Futurian, the one who betrays the Futurians, the Japanese character, Emmy. She decides to help out the present day characters. And the thing is, though, after they've gone back in time and they've changed the present so that Godzilla no longer exists, everyone still remembers Godzilla. Even the people who did not travel through time. And I'm just like,
yeah, I did notice that flaw. It was like, they came back and everyone went, "Oh, Godzilla's gone," but now we've got King Ghidorah, and I was like, "What? How do they know?"
Yeah, exactly. Like, I understand the ones who had traveled in time. You can make an argument that because they weren't there when the timeline changed. Like I was doing with, maybe it takes time for their memories to snap back into place. Maybe maybe they exist outside of time, so they're going to remember both versions of it, or something like that. You can make an argument for. And then you've got the problem of, okay, so now King Ghidorah is the problem, and now we have to get Godzilla back. So we're gonna mutate. We're gonna go back to where the dinosaur is, and then we're gonna irradiate him. But he's gonna get irradiated twice, and he's gonna fight Ghidorah, and then Godzilla is going to become now even more powerful, and so now they have to. Emmy has to go to the future and get Ghidorah and give him cybernetic parts and come back to the present. And it's just like, at this point, I'm just like, forget it. I can't follow this anymore. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess, as I said, I'm maybe looking at it through nostalgia, but I kind of was able to look past the craziness of it, and I really enjoyed it for all its eccentricities. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess I was going into it kind of having that prior knowledge, and I was going into it probably even having forgotten large chunks of it. Mm-hmm. I think I was going into it expecting it to be like a bit of a wonky 90s film. So I was, yeah, I have to admit, I really enjoyed it. I was worried that I was going to go back to watching this film that I watched as a kid and loved as a kid and think, oh, this is awful. But I was kind of pleasantly surprised. And I think nostalgia allowed me to overlook some of the, I definitely noticed all of these things that you're talking about, but to me, they didn't matter. And that's probably just because of my connection to the film.
No, and that's fair. And yeah, I totally get that too. And there are definitely movies that I go back and I watch that I loved when I was younger, and I still love them just because that was the time when I experienced them. So I totally get that. Like me, this is my first time watching it, and I am going into it with a critical eye because I know I'm going to be talking about it on this show. So I am thinking about these things. And maybe that is a little unfair for what this film is trying to do. But I do feel like, well, one of the things I think is weird though about it is that I think it's not so much that I think this stuff is ridiculous. I think it's more that I'm a little bit disappointed because I think there are seeds of a really interesting, intelligent story in here. And I feel like they kind of muddle it up with all this other stuff, and then it just becomes it kind of goes off the rails because of that.
I would love to see them do a -1 kind of retelling of this, because I think that it could. I think you're right. I think it could actually make for a really good, like, serious movie, like a proper movie. But yeah, I think what was really interesting for me is there was elements of it, you're saying there's all these different, there's the Dorats, there's Ghidorah, there's like the Mecha Ghidorah, and it really kind of felt like, and I don't really know what merchandising was like for Godzilla in Japan at the time, but it felt like it's kind of coming from that kind of, which we're probably still in, that cynical era of making stuff to sell action figures and to sell plushies and things. Because I was watching it going, kids would want a cuddly Dorat. Kids would want, an action figure of Ghidorah, an action figure of Mecha Ghidorah, an action figure of Godzilla, an action figure of the dinosaur. There was a lot here that I was kind of looking at it, Transformers and stuff that came about because they wanted to sell toys and they introduced new characters just to sell new toys. It almost felt like that was happening with this film, and I'm not educated enough on the kind of that side of things in terms of Godzilla, whether that sort of culture of merchandise existed at that point, but it really felt like it was almost being made to sell extra stuff.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's possible. My understanding is that, and there are lots of Godzilla toys and toys of all these different monsters. So I think there's some degree of that. But I feel like, I don't know, I'm just thinking back to, did you ever watch The Toys That Made Us on Netflix?
Yeah.
So, they did the Power Rangers episode, and they were talking about, I think it was the Common Rider stuff they're talking about, or something, and they're talking about when like when they're originally trying to, Saban was originally trying to bring some of these Japanese programs over to the US. One of the problems came with merchandising because a lot of the Japanese toys didn't have like villains. It was just mostly just like the good guys only, or it was just like, these type of like dress up type costumes as opposed to like actual toys to play with. So the American toy makers are like, well, the American companies were like, well, that's not enough. We need more stuff that kids can, to buy more things. So that kind of seems to be, so maybe maybe there's some degree of that. I'm not exactly sure. And I don't know what it was. And I don't know how much of the toys I've seen for these Godzilla figures that I've seen like in, different shops, how many of them are more recent things and how many of them are being resold from back then. So, because most of these things I see in secondhand shops anyway, but I'm not quite sure when they were made, when they came about. But one of the things too is like, I think this idea of, in the future, Japan becoming an economic powerhouse and becoming so powerful that people are starting to fear Japan's power. I mean, I think that's an interesting thing because that was one of the debates, even within Japan, about the need for Article 9, basically where Japan, the pacifist constitution, the pacifist clause in the constitution, which basically states that Japan renounces the ability to wage war. They did end up kind of compromising on that to create the self-defense force, although that was at the time at the urging of the Americans because they needed support for the Korean War. And even now it's become a topic of debate because you did have the Conservative Party wants to, or at least I'm not sure how much it is like the main thing, but at least elements of the Conservative Party want to amend Article 9 so that Japan can have a standing military again. And one of the arguments that is consistently used, even within Japan, is the idea of, we don't know how much Japan has actually learned from World War II, and we don't know if that Japan can actually be trusted with a standing military. And that is kind of an idea that is being played with, in a bit of a subtle way, I think, with the whole fear of Japan in the future, I think. Because I'm not sure if I missed it or if I'm just half remembering it because I saw this late last night, but I don't recall if they said that Japan was becoming an actual threat to people, but like it made me wonder what makes Japan different from like the US being the world economic superpower. Why is it worse?
What they said in the film was that the Futurians that have come back are basically from an organization that believe that every country should be equal. So they don't believe that it's fair that Japan has this economic power. So they're wanting to kind of redress it. So I think they're not coming back to raise Japan to the ground completely. I think they said, we're going to destroy everything but Tokyo and then kind of teach them a new way, I think was the kind of patronizing way.
Yeah, I remember that line.
And I think that, so I don't think it was necessarily that it was a threat. I think it was more just that they felt like it wasn't fair that they were bigger than everyone else. Which I thought was interesting because it wasn't that they were coming back and saying Japan in the future is dangerous. They were basically just coming back and saying Japan in the future is too successful.
And I thought that, and again, that's an interesting thing especially because they did get two Western actors to play these two Futurians. And I thought it was very interesting, the idea of like, we'll leave Tokyo alone. Tokyo will be fine. We're going to destroy everything else. And then we're going to teach them a better way. And it felt like a very American idea of diplomacy, right? I mean, I don't know if you know the comedian Dane Cook, and he's not the greatest comedian, but he does have this one joke that came to mind as I was watching this last night. And he says that he says something along the lines of like, we're America. We'll bomb the shit out of everybody, and then we'll come back and we'll apologize like 20 years later. We're like, listen, we're really sorry about that. We didn't know the bomb was going to do that. Hey, do you think it's okay if we just kind of like, leave, our bases and, a couple thousand troops here? Do you mind? You wouldn't want us to get drunk again, would you? Okay. Okay. And it did give me that kind of vibe here because it is kind of this idea of And I feel like there is an argument there to be made that you can have this criticism of, you know, how much can Japan be trusted to become more powerful? And, you know, how fair is it for these Westerners to come in and basically tell us, hey, you know, you're getting too big for your britches. We need to tear you down a few pegs. And we need to teach you the better way. I mean, I think there's interesting ideas in there, but it's just, I feel like they get overshadowed by the fact that everything, including the kitchen sink, has been thrown into this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, that definitely makes sense.
And also, too, the idea of this, it's also so funny that this version of Godzilla is this dinosaur who survived extinction into the modern day. And at first, when they were talking about this, my first thought was, oh, it must have been like, you know, in the Roland Emmerich Godzilla film, where it was just like, you know, basically a mutated lizard that got, you know, became giant size. But no, it was an actual dinosaur that was walking around on his island.
Yeah, there's no real explanation of why this dinosaur was there, how it got there, like how it survived. You know, were there others?
Yeah.
that was the thing that got me. It was like, well, if that dinosaur is there, it must have come from like a line of dinosaurs, and they can't have just been like asexually reproducing over time. So where does this dinosaur come from? Like, where's the evidence of its ancestors? It is kind of just there so they can mutate it. And there's an interesting, I think I can't remember what position he is, maybe like the major or something in the Japanese army, that kind of, you know, they thank the dinosaur for saving them.
Mm-hmm.
And then later in the film, when Godzilla is kind of going on a rampage, there's this moment where he refuses to leave his office because he's now a successful businessman, and he refuses to leave his office because he wants to show some sort of respect for Godzilla. And there's a moment, there's almost like a wistful, like looking across the bar at each other moment where he and Godzilla share a look, and then Godzilla just absolutely annihilates him. But I kind of, that for me was a little bit, I think it was meant to be this really kind of poignant moment, but it came across as a little bit funny for me. That you know, Godzilla was gazing into this businessman's eyes as he was standing on the, you know, whatever floor of his office building.
Speaking of Shindo is the character's name.
Yeah.
Did you know the actor who played that guy?
No.
So
it seemed vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him.
So he's Yoshio Tsuchiya, and probably most famous for being in Seven Samurai. He was the firebrand Rikichi.
Okay.
So yeah,
I didn't put that together. Yeah.
And it was funny because I was watching him, and I'm just like, when I was watching him on screen, I'm like, no way is this guy old enough to have been in World War II, even in 1991. Then I looked it up, and I'm like, no, he was born in 1927. He just looked really good for his age.
Excellent.
So I thought that was kind of funny, because I literally wrote in my notes, dude doesn't look old enough to have fought in World War II. And then I checked it. And then right after that, I double checked. I'm like, oh, wait, no, it could have been. He actually was age appropriate. Oh, they used the same actor to play him in the past, too. So it didn't look.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a little bit of a disconnect there when they said, wow, he looks so young now. I'm like, does he? Does he really? Come on.
Does he look young now, or did he look old then?
Yeah, that's the question. Yeah, exactly. He looks young now, not then. But I think also another thing that kind of muddles this film up is just that I think there are too many protagonists, because we have Terasawa, who's this science fiction author and is like kind of like the main protagonist. We have this Professor Mazaki. We have Shindo, the businessman who is the World War II vet. We have Emi. We have Miki, who is the psychic, and it's just like, and also we have the android M11, which is an interesting. But it's like, I think we could have combined some of these characters and really cut down on some of the glut here, because I don't think we needed this many characters here.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that there's not enough for each of them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I think that, yeah, I agree that Yeah, I think the protagonists were spread too thinly, and I get that they were trying to do it so you're getting different perspectives. So you're getting, like the sort of science fiction slash journalism-y sort of aspect. You're getting the scientific aspect. You're getting, I still think it's strange, the psychic aspect. But I think that, yeah, you're right that, yeah, there's not enough for each of them to do. And I think that's, common of some of the, even I think like the American Godzilla films that have come out recently,
Hmm.
I think are guilty of that as well. I think that there are
Oh
in
God,
certain,
absolutely, yes.
there's too many protagonists, there's too many people that you're trying to follow, and it does make the story more difficult to follow. The other thing is like all of these people, especially kind of the three kind of central ones, they're always together. They're
Hmm.
always all experiencing the same things. So it's not even like they're all going away and doing separate things and then kind of coming back and you're following different strands of the story. They're always there together. So it's not, yeah, I just,
Well, I mean, and Terasawa, I think, is the biggest example, and he is the main character too, which I think is
yeah,
kind of crazy because looking over this, he doesn't really do anything.
yeah.
There is nothing
He's,
he really the biggest thing he does is he has this theory that the dinosaur had muted into Godzilla after the hydrogen bomb test. You don't need him for that though. You can have the professor come up with that theory instead, which would probably
yeah,
make more sense coming from the professor anyway. Or you could have Shindo come up with that theory too, because he is this, now he runs this massive company now, so that's very powerful and
yeah.
is working with nuclear energy too, because we find out in a very weird offhanded comment, he's like, "Oh yeah, we have a nuclear powered submarine." Like, what the?
Yeah. I like that. It's like, we have a nuclear powered submarine, but don't worry, we don't keep it in Japan.
Yeah, we don't keep it in Japan. Like, I don't think that's the main issue here. There are other problems we have with that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and even like, I mean, I think really you could have gotten away with this with mostly, Miki, I understand because, she is a tie to the previous film. So I think keeping her
Yeah,
around is a good idea. She's also the one who senses that Godzilla still exists in some form. So
yeah.
that is good. At least gives her something to do. You can have the professor in there because he is, someone who can, serve as an exposition machine. Um, and then get rid of Terasawa completely because you don't need him at all. And honestly, why not combine M11 and Emmy into one character? Because I don't think you need them to be two separate characters either.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think you're right. They could be one character
Mm-hmm.
easily.
Because we know that cybernetic technology exists. She could easily be like a cyborg which would provide you with those, the actual plot things that M11 is needed for. Because other than that,
You,
M11 isn't needed for anything.
yeah, I mean, obviously, you would miss the absolutely glorious scene of her opening his head and slotting in some CD-ROMs to turn him from evil to good. Um, But I loved that the evil programming were on red discs and the good stuff was on green discs. That just made
Of
me
course.
laugh.
And
Um,
I mean, this is a law of technology. I mean, that's just the way it
yeah.
goes.
But yeah, I felt like M11 was kind of I could see what they were trying to do, but it was very like, why not? I love the fact that the android had to put on a helmet that had a camera on it
Hmm.
to like broadcast stuff. It's like, why does the android not just have cameras in his eyes?
I had
it,
the
it
exact same
was
thought.
it was a very like it didn't feel like an idea that was thought through enough. So yeah, I think you're right. I think the Emmy and M11 could easily have been combined. As you say, it could be a cybernetic character, so you don't need to go through that. You could still have her realizing kind of the error of her ways and coming back and doing this. And you don't need to have the whole like hacking into the android to change the
Hmm.
behavior. And then yeah, then she has a bit more to do. Um, there's also a great moment. I say great for all the wrong reasons. Right at the very end of the film, when Emmy goes, "Oh, by the way, I'm related to you."
Yeah.
which is just so funny.
I had a feeling that was coming. I saw that coming. But the thing that kills me about that is up until this point, it feels like Terasawa is hitting on her a lot of the time.
Yeah, I know. There's very much like there's almost kind of like a romantic subplot. You know, she's like, I want to stay in the past because you're here, and you're like, oh, all right, okay. So I was thinking at the end, you're going to become a couple. She's going to stay in the 90s, and you're going to become a couple. And then, yeah, at the end, she's like, by the way, I'm your like great granddaughter, and it's. And then it's like, see ya, and then she goes back to the future, and it's just it was such a throwaway. Like any other film would make that like a central plot point of like her being related and her being torn between like her mission to come back and like, you know, equalize the world versus her loyalty to her family. And you would think that would actually be like a major plot point, and that would make things, you know, way more interesting and give her so much more to do. And yet it's just thrown in at the end as an afterthought.
Yeah. And and I think this too, and just like that whole thing with the nuclear sub, it's just like there are these things that they just kind of drop in out of nowhere because, and it's stuff that really should have gotten at least a mention earlier somewhere. So, but it feels like a lot of this stuff is just, they just tossed way too much stuff into this movie, and that meant that they just kind of lost focus on what they were supposed to be doing here. And it's sad because, you know, the monster fight scenes are actually really well done. Like I was really kind of amazed at how well these practical effects actually held up.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. For all the flaws in the human side or the android side of the plot, the kaiju battles are great. Like watching Godzilla and King Ghidorah facing off against each other, it's really good. And like, you know, I enjoyed the way that kind of, you know, the puppeteering on Ghidorah's three heads is great, and seeing them all kind of act in different ways. Because I know kind of the early Godzilla films sometimes get a bit of a bad rep from people who aren't fans of the series, because they're like, oh, it's just a man in a suit. But like, you do kind of like, okay, yeah, I mean, that's true, but you know, it's really well done. And I think that yeah, I thought the battles were exciting and really held my attention. And because that was one of the things that, going back to it, I was like, how are the special effects going to hold up?
And you know, when it comes and honestly, when it comes to like the time traveler stuff and their spaceship and all that kind of stuff, not well at all.
No.
But when it comes to the monsters, yeah, very well they hold up. I was very impressed. I was nervous when I started watching. I started seeing like the kids ship and everything, and I'm just like, ooh, I don't know what it's going to look like when they get the monsters to start fighting each other. But obviously they dumped all their money where it mattered, and it was in those kaiju fight scenes. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's also like, as I say, I don't have I've not watched loads and loads of Godzilla films, but I've watched a handful, and it struck me how long it took to get to any sort of monster action. You know, it was a fair chunk of the movie in. I think we're probably close to halfway before we actually saw any kind of main stuff, you know, that sort of stuff going on. And that kind of surprised me that, you know, it took so long, because it wasn't like, it's not like it was an origin story where you've got to kind of build up to the first reveal of Godzilla or something. You know, people know who Godzilla is, you know, and it's a sequel. So it's not like Godzilla's coming out of nowhere in this world as well. So I think that, yeah, it surprised me how long it took to see any of that. I suppose in a practical sense, you know, you got to save your money and have maybe fewer big fights, but make them more impressive.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would have, and I think a big part of that is just because of, like we said, with all these characters in here and just like all this plot that they're shoving into this movie that it really doesn't need, that it ends up dragging for a good point up until we get to that first battle scene. And I feel like that is, I feel like that, yeah, I feel like just all this very kind of like convoluted, overstuffed plot is really detracting from what we're all here to really see, and that's Godzilla and Ghidorah throwing down. And it takes too long to get to that point, and by the time it does get to that point, I mean, I think it's some of us might actually be burned out on how long it's been on everything else. So,
Yeah.
I mean, fortunately, it was good enough where it made me get up and take notice of the movie at that point, but it was kind of a slog to get there. And it's not, and we're not talking a long movie. This is like an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think I think I actually did check. I think it was something like 45 minutes, 50 minutes before we saw any sort of kind of monster action.
It sounds about right. Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking the same thing, and I think I was checking around the same time, so that sounds about right too.
Yeah.
But yeah. My basic summation is it's not a great film. I mean, like I said, I haven't seen all the Godzilla films. The ones I have seen, I mean, I would definitely put this of obviously the holy trinity of Godzilla, Shin Godzilla, and -1 is not going to be touched by this. But I definitely, but I'm definitely going to watch this over, Godzilla Raids Again. I think this is definitely a much better film than that one was.
Yeah, I think, I mean, for all its flaws, I love this film. I've grown up watching this. This film came out the year I was born. I didn't actually realize that. But like, I love this film kind of because of and in spite of its flaws. And yeah, for me, like, this film symbolizes my childhood, and it was really nice going back and watching it and not, sometimes you go back and watch something that you watched as a kid and you're like, your whole childhood shatters in front of your eyes because you're like, oh God, no, what have I done? And this, I actually really enjoyed it, and it made me go, oh man, like, I like Godzilla movies and I enjoyed this one. Why, even though it's objectively not a great movie, but I like it in spite of that. And it made me go, I'm going to go watch more of these because this was fun. This was a fun experience for me, and I could enjoy it for what it was. Yeah, I'm not deluded enough to think it's not Oscar worthy, but it's, for me, it was, yes, bloated, but a fun ride.
There's one other thing I wanted to mention about this, and this is the actor who plays Terasawa, Kosuke Toyohara, which I didn't realize this at the time, but I did think he looked kind of familiar. But then my wife was like coming in and out of the room, and she was like, "Oh, he's in Ganable." I don't know if you've watched Ganable. It's on, I think it's Hulu internationally, but it's on Disney Plus here in Japan. It's a Japanese TV show about this police officer who gets assigned to this small town, and there's like this really large, like really old family there, and they've got like there's like a whole cannibal history they have with them. So it's like all about it's a really good show. And in the second season, he plays one of the characters in episodes that are set back in like the 1950s. So it was very interesting to see him in that, like literally just like last week, and then last night watching him in this and being like, that guy looks really familiar. And then my wife pointed it out, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I just double checked, and yeah, it's the same guy. So this is a really cool little note there. But yeah, anyway, Ian, thanks so much for coming on and for letting me, kind of put down one of your childhood favorite movies. But appreciate you being a good sport about that.
Yeah, I'll forgive you, Perry.
But anyway, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Ian Listens. That's EOIN. You can find me on Goodreads if you want to find out a bit more about my published work and where you can read some of my stories. And I will also give Perry my link tree, which has for the show notes, which has loads of kind of links to other places where you can find me.
Awesome. We'll have that stuff in the show notes, so please make sure to check that out. As for us, japanonfilm.com is the website, and we are Japan on Film on the socials, which mostly Blue Sky, but we do post release announcements on Threads and Instagram and Facebook, so check us out in all those places. And please remember, we are part of the Film Stories Podcast Network, so you can listen up to the credits, hear what other shows are coming up, and check them out as well. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
The Japan on Film podcast is produced by me, Perry Constantine, in conjunction with the Film Stories Podcast Network. Visit japanonfilm.com for show notes, episodes, and information about being a guest yourself. You can also reach out to me on the website's contact form if you have questions or comments about Japanese movies or the show itself. The show is at Japan on Film on Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram, so please be sure to follow us. If you'd like to support the show, you can donate on japanonfilm.com, purchase from our advertisers, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Join the Film Stories Podcast Network Discord from the link in the show notes to connect with me and many other cinema fans and podcasters.